Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, talk of people self-identifying in the state which best reflects their beliefs. The idea of a world in which identities merge in new and interesting and diverse ways may certainly seem compelling, but beneath it is a reality in which the best off in the worst parts of the world move to the best off parts of the world, and those left behind are condemned to never realise the identity that Tom cares about, and to never progress out of the poverty in which they are trapped. That alone should be a good reason to reject what proposition I've given you today. I'm going to talk about two things. The first is the pace of cultural and physical adaptation in countries to which people emigrate. The second is the effect on those countries from which they leave. But briefly, some rebuttal. First of all, this idea that Tom gave us, that signing a contract is much more meaningful if it's free. Now, people can choose which state they want to go into. But the problem is, it's not free for all parts of that contract, like was illustrated by the example that Shane gave you. Tom responded by saying, no, it is government signing the contract and the immigrants signing the contract. But there's no meaningful freedom that Tom's world leaves for governments here, because he believes that they're obliged to sign that contract, that overriding moral duties that we deny place it upon them. So we say that that doesn't work. Secondly, he said that all we care about is total utility, so that's why moral luck is completely unacceptable. Well, first of all, if total utility is all you care about, there will likely be inequalities in the world that will likely result from moral luck, so your situation doesn't solve that. No, thank you. We also say it's just an implausible claim that all we care about is total utility. Under that logic, it is not really open borders that proposition presented to us today, but full redistributive duties that put all resources in the place where they are most efficiently used round the world. We think that is just unacceptable and hopefully unpersuasive for most of you in the audience. Then he gave us this idea about sort of acts and emissions. Again, this is unintuitive for the same reason that I said before, but also because we say there's a difference between sustaining causal chains, like allowing harms that already exist in the world to exist, and instituting new harms on your own. We say, if you remove me from a scenario in which I can help someone, no thank you, they are still as bad off. To blame me for the result, therefore, of not helping them, the same consequence, you are effectively blaming me for the situation in the world rather than for my acts. We say there's an implausible view of the acts and emissions distinction. Finally, we said this idea of the value of self-identity. Well, even if we do accept the idea that there is a value to people moving to other states where they can better identify themselves or build up their identity, we don't see why that ability should be parasitic on damaging people in the nations that you leave. So we don't know, thank you. We say they are harmed in much more significant ways than identity. So let's look at the pace of cultural and physical adaptation. First of all, cultural integration. We do think that there is some value to people moving to states around the world, no thank you, but catastrophe ensues if cultural integration fails, if it leads to tensions and it leads to violence and extremism. We say rapid change most obviously provokes extremism for two reasons. One, because the rapid consequences, no thank you, which are sometimes negative, to people who are in the country already, for example, loss of jobs, are much greater and create a much bigger perception of a threat. We also say that much more rapid movement enables political individuals who want to radicalise populations or build on extremism to do so better. We say that is problematic as well. We also say huge new communities, no thank you, undermine the incentives to integrate. At present, where small communities initially build up in a state and then grow over time, the first arrivals have a good incentive to integrate, no thank you, with the rest of society and build up links. We say when huge numbers of people all arrive together, they collect together in areas. Those areas become ghettoized and links between them and the rest of society, I'll take in a moment, Tom, never develop. We say that is really problematic because integration to the rest of society you move into is vital for social mobility and vital for social choice. And indeed, the identity realization that Tom cared about. If you're trapped in an immigrant community in a nation, you don't have much choice over how you can identify. It's also vital for political power in a state, and that's always going to be important.
Okay, you started by saying that only wealthy people are only going to be able to migrate. Now you say there's going to be a flood of migrants across the world. Which do you go with? And if it's the latter...
Sorry, Tom, you overlooked a very obvious point that what is wealthy in one nation is often not wealthy in another. The wealthy people who are able to immigrate to the West are wealthy by their domestic standards. That doesn't mean that when they come in, they're going to be suddenly rising to the top of the elite aristocracy. So we say functional immigrant communities become harder to create when that change is rapid as well. Because excess demand is put on those mechanisms of support that exist for new immigrants coming in. So when an immigrant arrives in a nation, they often look to other people already in that society for support. We say now, once huge numbers come in very short terms, they overwhelm those methods, no thank you, of help and support both provided by the existing communities and also by the state. We also say that it's not just about integration between people who have been living in a state for a long time and new arrivals. Different immigrant communities often hate each other and have very strong racial divides between them. When they come in huge numbers, it further exacerbates the divide that results between them. We say that promotes tensions as well. We think all of these tensions undermine the ability of people to self-actualize or whatever it is that Tom cares about in these states, and it also subjects them to violence, no thank you, and discrimination. We also say simply that the physical adaptation is similarly problematic. Infrastructure, welfare support, policing is overloaded. How also then does this damage the states with large emigrating populations? First of all, very boring argument about the brain drain. We say it is not a sustainable view of human habitation around the world for everyone to move to the most developed bits of land. And frankly, that results in overpopulation, it results in rapid resource consumption, it's extremely inefficient. So you need to spread polities and states around the world. We divide human civilization up for historical but also pragmatic reasons. We say completely open borders ensures that within those states around the world that necessarily exist, the wealthiest, the most contributory lead. They're both economically contributory, but also political. When all the civil servants, for example, in a country left, there would be no ability to sustain a functional government. That was the situation the Congo found itself in when it was given independence, and a massive reason why it's been at war for the subsequent 40 years. We say also you get the destruction of functional cultures, because the rapid departure of huge groups of people also undermines the sense of identity that often binds nations together. We say that's really important. But finally, a particularly sinister fact. We say rapidly declining populations are a classic fear amongst conservative and nationalist governments. These often care about national strength, and it is seen that people leaving a country is diminishing that national strength over time. And amongst highly emigrant nations, like in the developing world, such governments are common. Fears of declining national strength mobilize national movements and radicalize. They often try to substitute the population decline with greater military growth. We say that only exacerbates instability and conflict in those parts of the world, which are already the most unstable. A good example of this, but not to offend anyone, is Russia, where nationalization is massively linked to the ongoing terminal problem of a lack of population. We say that doesn't help governments grow, it doesn't give the freedom that people care about, ladies and gentlemen. It results in crises and damage that we think are unacceptable. I am very proud of those.